that it itself is irrelevant. And that would be when it is no longer trying to work with beings, but with being itself, capital B. Because then relevance realization is actually irrelevant, because it right? Because all you do is start to do, this is like the Tao, right? You start to parse it out, and then you get the combinatorial explosion that relevance realization has to deal with. But relevance realization can come to a moment where it realizes that it's irrelevant and fall away, and that is when you are trying to enter ratio religio, right relationship with being, with the ground of being per se.
I'll find my own path.
And for me, that was a way
how'd you pull all those heists?
of taking something that I had been experiencing and talking a lot about within the mindfulness practices, which is experiences of non-duality, and the work I've always done on relevance realization. I couldn't put them together. And so what I had to do was I had to, like Donald was just saying, is I had to give up, right, a kind of, it's always relevance realization kind of idea. But that actually there's a possibility for it to functionally find itself irrelevant, and then open us up phenomenologically to no set of beings, but to being or the ground of being, depending on your ontology per se. And then the point there isn't any cognitive grasp, but to be as connected with it as you possibly can. So that's just an example of an important, I considered that an important correction. Terror. I'm afraid that my work, especially the stuff I've recently just published a few months ago, integrating relevance realization and predictive processing, is going to make AI, like autonomous AI, really more possible. And that
Like mending a shadow.
terrifies me. And not just sort of egocentric terror, like moral terror, like a sense of moral responsibility.
Are those ever the same? Some people would say that anytime we think of morality, it comes from a sense of ego, and that as soon as you dissolve the ego, you dissolve morality. There is no good, there is no bad. So when you say that it's not an egocentric manner, but a moral manner,
I am very hesitant to say that morality is egocentric to core. Are there theories of morality that are? Yes, but I think there are theories that are ontocentric rather than egocentric. But can we do that later? Because I first want to finish this point, which is right. I'm wrestling with this, and the way I'm wrestling with it is, first of all, I'm hoping that the work I'm doing, especially with a lot of other people, to integrate these kinds of theoretical discoveries with ideas about the deep connections between predictive processing, relevance realization, meaning in life, wisdom, overcoming self-deception, all the sapiential stuff we've been talking about. I'm hoping that because I've been arguing for the connection, that those two things will stay wedded together. And I don't know if I'm right about that. I like sometimes I get like right. I don't know if I'm right about it. But right now I can't go back. And also, I think there was so much value. I mean, we published the paper and we gave what we thought was the first explanation of the autism psychosis continuum rather than just description. Think of the psychotherapeutic and pedagogical benefits that could have, right? So but I do hesitate about this, about whether or not my attempt to keep the science and the spirituality wedded together. There's no teleology for that to me. Me and this whole community, what Sibylla Kings calls this little corner of the internet, where we're trying to do that. We could fail, and I think that scares me.
Okay, so Don, just to repeat, the question was about the limitations of one's own theories. And then also, I saw your eyes light up on the mention of morality and ego, so you can comment on that as an aside after.
Sure. So, I'll talk about my theory in just a second. But I'll just mention a classic case, which is Einstein's general relativity together with quantum field theory. But those theories assume space-time is fundamental in their fundamental concepts, right? Quantum fields are defined over space-time. Einstein's theory of gravity is the theory in which space-time is fundamental, and its curves are what we experience as gravity. So space is the fundamental concept that's going on. So you might say, well, how can that theory then say, or entail that space-time is doomed without contradicting itself, right? I mean, how do we avoid shooting ourselves in the foot? Well, that's the glory of science, because when you put those theories together, they tell you precisely, they say at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters and 10 to the minus 43 seconds, this theory stops. It no longer makes sense. There are no operational meanings for space and time at those levels. So that's the beauty of those theories. Even though Einstein didn't expect that to come out, he didn't even expect black holes to come out. I mean, Schwarzschild found that solution to his equations. So when you take your ideas, even if you're a genius like Einstein, and you put them in mathematics, you're going to have your own theory come back and slap you in the face and tell you things that you might not like. Einstein did not like black holes. And I think that he was unhappy with the idea that space-time ceased to have operational meaning at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. My view is that's what we want from a theory. I love a theory that tells you precisely at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, I stop. And you need something new. You need a new tool. So in our theory of conscious agents, so we have a theory of consciousness. It's a mathematically precise theory. Those who are interested, if you just Google objects of consciousness, that's the title of our paper, and my name, Objects of Consciousness and Hoffman, you'll find the paper. It's free online, so you no problem to get it. So that's a mathematical theory of consciousness. It's just I don't view it as the final theory of everything. As I said, it's just a next baby step in science. That's my view of the theory. Here's our next baby step, but it's mathematically precise. And so the question is, does it tell me its precise limits? And it does. And that's one thing that I love about the theory. So one theorem of the theory in its current formulation is that anytime you have multiple agents, multiple conscious agents, that collection, even if they're not interacting, that collection satisfies the definition of a conscious agent. So it's a conscious agent. That's just a theorem. And what that theorem entails ultimately is that there is one conscious agent, because all of the agents that you could possibly have are combined and they create a single new agent. So there is ultimately one agent. But here's the problem, and here's the limit of our theory. Suppose I start with a countable infinity of conscious agents. So agent 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to infinity. Well, so I have this countable infinity of agents. A left 0 is infinity. But now our theorem says that every possible combination of agents, so agent 1 and 1 plus 2, that's an agent. 1 plus, so it's the power set. So there's a power set of new agents. Well, we know that the power set has cardinality A of 1. It's a new, bigger infinity. So now let's look at those agents, and we take all their combinations. Well, that's a new power set. That's A lift 2. So we're going to have to go to get to a description of the one ultimate conscious agent. It's a theorem of our theory that there is one conscious agent. But to get to it, to actually describe it, we're going to have to climb up all of Cantor's hierarchy. Now, there's an infinite number of steps in Cantor's hierarchy, which means we cannot get there. So in 20,000 years, if we're still using this framework, and we've gotten to level 5 billion of Cantor's hierarchy, it's time to break out the champagne. We went through 500 billion levels, we're at A left 500 billion, and we learned a lot at every level. So we learned something new about consciousness every time we transcended and went to a new level. Time to break out the champagne. How much further do we have to go? Infinity. You're not any closer than when you started, and yet you learned a lot. And so what I love about this theory is it says there is the one conscious agent, and number two, using this theory, you'll never be able to describe it. But number three, you'll know precisely how far you've gotten and precisely how infinitely far you have to go at every step of the theory. So the theory itself predicts its own failure to actually describe an entity that it's a theorem exists from the theory. So that for me, that's one thing I love about the theory is that it tells me immediately how far I've gotten. And right now we're just at Aleph 0. We haven't even gotten to Aleph 1 yet. So we have a long way to go.
John, do you have any comments? Quickly?
Yeah. I want to know more about what is meant by conscious agent and what is meant by the rejection of space-time. But before I do that, I mean, the arguments aren't identical, but they converge. I mean, these are very, in that sense, converging with Neoplatonic arguments that the one lies beyond all possible conceptualization. Because if you try to understand it, you have to understand it in terms of its structure or its cause, and therefore you haven't actually achieved